Anti-Oedipus, Silvestre. Wishes up to tell you pretty things. I can't go like yellow. You know, agent your bites the whistle. Works well.
Here I go, anti-Oedipus.
Yes, it's a million bricks one these days. So it's still a some. After.
Here I go, anti-Oedipus.
Oh.
It functions everywhere, sometimes without stopping, sometimes discontinuously. It breathes, it heats, it eats, it shits, it fucks. One mistake ever said the it everywhere. It is machines, not at all metaphorically. Machines are machines with their couplings, their connections. An organ machine is connected with a source machine, one emits a flux which the other cuts. The breast is a machine that produces milk, and the mouth a machine coupled to that one. The mouth of the anorexic hesitates between an eating machine, an anal machine, a talking machine, a breathing machine, deeper machine, asthma, attack. This is why we are all tinkerers, each with their own little machines. An organ machine for an energy machine. There are always flux and cuts. Judge Schreber 5 has divine rays in his ass. Solar anus. And rest assured it works. Judge Schreber feels something, produced of something, and theorized about it. Something is being deduced effects of machines, not metaphors. Stroll of the schizophrenic. It's a better model than the neurotic lying on the couch. A bit of fresh air, relationship with the outside. Take the stroll of Lenz into the outdoors. It is different from moments when Lenz finds himself with his good pastor, who forces him to situate himself socially in relation to God, in relation to Father, in relation to Mother. On the contrary, he is in the mountains under the snow with other gods or without God at all, without family, without father or mother, with nature. What does my father want? Can he give me better? Impossible! Leave me alone. Everything is a machine. And three celestial machines, the stars are rainbows, alpine machines, each coupled with those of his body, noise machine. Uninterrupted, idling to mutter. It must feeling of endless bliss to be in contact with the profound, life profound to every form. To have a soul for the rocks, metals, water, and plants, to welcome into oneself, as in a dream, every element of nature, like flowers that breathe with the waxing and waning of the moon. Både det landskapet gissar where, både där vi multidagen ned, innan det replies. Krongas can be a chlorophyllin machine or a photosynthesis machine, or at least split his body as a part into such machines. Lenz put himself before the distinction of man nature, before all the identifications that this distinction conditions. He could not experience nature as nature, but as a process of production. There is no more man nor nature
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another lovely Tuesday here at the QC. Sorry for being a few minutes late. I got lost in the Trump thing, waiting for that stupid thing to start. It ends up being nothing, which is shocking. It was a fun few days. Boy, does he look rough, though. Goddamn, he looks rough. And then I started preparing for the stream late because I am terrible. So yeah, it's a fun time. What can I say? But today we're making our way through Schizoanalysis' second positive task, the final section of Anti-Oedipus. Someday we'll actually finish with this fucking book. Let me switch over to the reading. We are at the middle of, let's see, is that PDF? I don't want PDF up. I wanted, where is it? Why did it switch? What the shit? There. Oh, there it is. Good. It's been a journey as we've made our way getting here. Let me pull up my notes from last week, and we can kind of just keep moving from where we're at. Schizoanalysis, as we've been sort of talking through it, is trying to find a way to reinvent psychoanalysis. Evolve it, talk about the challenges of how it functions and how it works. The primary critique they have is that psychoanalysis pushes us in a place where we utilize symbolic registers, where we talk about how things are meant to come out, or that there is sort of a determinate style or context or category of various elements. And that this process, where we teach someone how to properly sublimate their desires into this symbolic realm, ultimately ends up creating the very repression that causes the narcissism, the neuroticism, the schizophrenic response, the paranoiac response, all in force, because of how these things sort of fall back on the production of subjectivity. The tasks of schizoanalysis are very different than the tasks of psychoanalysis for this reason. Psychoanalysis is focused on getting a person to open up, talk about themselves and how they relate things, their childhood, their relationship with their parents, how their larger symbolic structures exist. This is about doing away with those symbolic structures. The first destructive task, the destructive task of schizoanalysis, is to destroy symbolic structures. You do this by sort of getting people and to talk about the larger narrative things, and you begin breaking them apart. As you're breaking them apart, you utilize the process as they talk at the first positive task, which is understanding the indices of these very elements. The indices being not a symbolic register. Oh, it's this is your father, this is your mother, this is your penis, this is your vagina, but instead the attractants or detractants, the repulsions, or like magnetic forces almost, the indices of force that each sort of thing has underneath it, the pulsing, the impulses underneath. With that, the second positive task, as we've been kind of going through, is to begin to identify the various levels of pre or unconscious investment or interest, and how these things align. Because as the forces sort of pass through you, think of you as a sieve, as all of this sort of sluices through you, as the vitality of the impulses sluice through you, they're subjected to levels of this, or they are able to be indicated as levels of either unconscious investment, where you have clearly shown that you are invested in whole or in part into various structural elements, or you make the move to the second stage, which is the pre-conscious investments, how you see yourself and your interests socially, where you see yourself positioned inside of all of these things. As you make your way through this, and we finally get to where we're at, they're making their final sort of big upheaval of how this operates and how this works drastically differently than psychoanalysis. And we're going to start in 355 and make our way through. I think we did, I believe we did 355 last week. And we made our way a little bit further, but ultimately they're driving through, and it's a lot because there's a bit, if you're not super familiar with psychoanalytic thought as a thing, you're going to have to learn it and then unlearn it. And it's not exactly the most fun process in order to understand this, but they are speaking of the way that psychoanalytic thought, or you could say thought within capitalism, presumes that desire has these things built in, that these are the setups, the symbolic order, all of these things, that we're attracted to symbols. And by doing so, the damage that it wreaks is significant. The things it hides behind are significant. That push is kind of the big deal here. Bogdan, Yo-Yo Chef. Think IAI is cool on Anti-Oedipus. What the shit? Not really. Yes, maybe. I don't know what you mean by cool on it. I'm very confused. But, as always, we're going to make our way through. We're going to give a read to this, and then make our way a little bit further. Let me shrink myself down a bit. And let's bring the book up size-wise, because there's no reason not to. Get you guys a little bit more of that focus. If that works. Let me know if it doesn't work, by the way. From the start, that's where we're at, from the start right here at the top. From the start, we wonder if the libido knows father-mother, or rather, if it makes the parents function as something entirely different, as agents of production in relation to other agents in socio-desiring production. From the point of view of libidinal investment, parents not only open to the other, they are themselves countersected and divided by the other, who defamilializes them according to the laws of social production and desiring production. The mother herself functions as a rich woman or poor woman, maid or princess, pretty girl or old lady, blessed animal or blessed virgin, and all at once. Everything passes into the machine that causes the properly familial determinations to disintegrate. What the orphan libido invests is a field of social desire, a field of production and anti-production, with its breaks and flux where the parents are apprehended in non-parental functions and roles, confronting other roles and other functions. Does this amount to saying that the parents have no unconscious role as such? Of course, they have an unconscious role, but in two quite specific ways that deprive them even more of their supposed autonomy. In accordance with the distinction made by embryologists with regard to the egg between the stimulus and the organizer, parents are stimuli having an indifferent value that trigger the allocations of gradients or zones of intensity on the body without organs. It is in relation to the parents that in each case wealth or poverty will be situated, the relative richest or poorest as empirical forms of social difference, so that within this difference the parents again appear, allocated to such and such a zone, but under a different rubric from that of parents. And the organizer is the social field of desire, which alone designates the zones of intensity, with all the beings that populate these zones and determine their libidinal investment. Secondly, the parents as parents are terms of application that express the reduction of the social field invested by the libido to a finite aggregate of destination, where the destination finds nothing but impasses and blockages consonant with the mechanisms of psychic and social repression active in this field. Oedipus, such as Oedipus, in each of these senses, the third thesis of schizoanalysis posits the primacy of the libidinal investments of the social field over the familial investment, both in point of fact and by statute, an indifferent stimulus at the beginning, an extrinsic result at the point of arrival. The relation to the non-familial is always primary, in the form of sexuality of the field in social production and the non-human sex in desiring production, gigantism and dwarfism. It's a lot. There's a lot here. I heard someone trying to talk in. I don't know who it was. Apologies, but usually we don't jump like that. So rereading this and going through it, because this, again, the third task is kind of the third statement, third thesis of schizoanalysis in here, again, applies to that way that the unconscious investments versus the pre-conscious interests, the social versus the familial, the way that these things come together is the big deal here in psychoanalysis. For those who don't know, the way that it's considered is that your relationship with mom and dad, because they are the people directly around you at all times, that they're the ones who raise you, they're the ones who determine what you end up becoming socially. And so as such, since all of your social relationships are basically, in psychoanalysis, a reflection, a metaphor, a relation of how you are related to your mom, your dad, or mom, parents, to family, as such, everything else then stems from how you're related to your family. And so if you don't get along with your dad, you're going to have problems with authority and men. The old trope of women who have daddy issues are the ones who have more apt to go into sex industries. Men who have mommy issues are more apt to not be in positive relationships, because the first thing in psychoanalytic thought, and generally how we talk about people, is how you relate to your parents. If you have a healthy relationship with your parents, you're going to get along with people quite nicely. This is counter very much to what they're talking about, because for them, it is the opposite. And we'll get through kind of exactly what that means as we make their way through it. For the initial investment before the unconscious exists, maybe that's the pre-conscious. Bogdan, no. Feel free to ask questions instead of making statements, and see if you're following the text. So we start. And we're going to go bit by bit. Feel free to jump in, interrupt, make a comment, ask questions wherever you think we need to spend more time or you're not quite getting it. That's the point of how this functions. From the start, we wonder if the libido knows father, mother, or rather, if it makes the parents function as something entirely different, as agents of production in relation to other agents in socio-desiring production. Their first thing they want to kick up is, hey, can we first take a second? Does the libido even know mommy, daddy? Does it know who your father is? Does it have this conception of that's mom, that's dad? That thing, which is traditional psychoanalytic categories. You absolutely, from birth, relate to mom and dad. They are things. They're specific things that you relate to. They're high power things that you relate to. But maybe not, maybe desire, maybe the libido, the impulses, the forces of life actually don't know mommy, daddy. What if instead mom and dad are productive agents within this larger apparatus, arrangement of things? The phrase they use, agents of production, is itself really an interesting way to talk about it, because again, in psychoanalytic thought, you tend to make the comment around, how you relate to dad, and you're reflecting things back and forth. It's more of a relationship with dad. But if we talk about them as agents of production themselves, because they're people, it's not so much that these people function first as the family member or the dad or the symbolic position, but that they also are nodes of things, nodes of productive elements within these networks that exceed a family unit entirely. This is more Marx than Marx. This is social production as Marx talks about it, like brought straight through. And it's very much against the idea Lacan put forward, but it uses it in a really clever, interesting way For Lacan, very much the father-mother are pure symbolic positions. And he had this entire thing about how the symbolic operates and the name of the father, like all this crazy shit. And they actually bring all of that in because by doing that, they're able to say, well, actually, you're right. It's not the person. They're like, yeah, Lacan, you're right. The symbolic position is not the person. The person is a socio-desiring machine that operates alongside it. And the symbolic is something that's created later, which is very Lacanian. Guattari really did some clever stuff by playing with that. And again, focusing on the libido. They go on to say, from the point of view of libidinal investment, parents not only open to the other everything, they are themselves countersected and divided by the other, who defamilialize them according to the laws of social production and desiring production. The mother herself functions as rich woman, poor woman, maid, princess, pretty girl, old lady, animal, blessed virgin, and all at once. Le deux à la fois, both at once, is probably better to said. But yeah, it's intended to be like all at once. Either one of these, which is, again, if we talk about Freud looking at these things. One sec. So confused by some people in chat. I'm so confused sometimes. It's not just me, right, Estelle? It's not just me. Anyway, the phrasing they're using is particularly talking about a handful of Freud's analysis. With the Wolfman, for example, he saw a poor woman maid cleaning the ground for Freud. This is because he saw his mother in the carnal act and therefore was associating mom to be this or that or that. And they're saying, well, wait, no, it's not that mom is the position of one of these things or that you're relating it. It's that mom is all of these things. The mother functions and changes function because mother doesn't really mean anything. The person in that position, they're fascinating because it's all of it, but also none of it, and shifting and being whatever it needs to be. Instead of talking about the symbolic as, oh, that's because you see mom as this, and this is you seeing her as a sexual object. It's an illusion. It's a way of viewing the symbol. No. These are actually defamilialized. This is the person, the being has a multifaceted existence. The woman who is mother, the person who is mother, can be rich or poor or both, can be maid princess, both, can be girl old lady, both, animal virgin, both. This is the simultaneity of this is the point. The social field that exceeds and extends and determines familial relations creates the milieu in which these relations take place. And that's the big push. That's a big push.
Brooks,
Yes.
the way he ends this paragraph with gigantism and dwarfism.
Yes.
Is it gigantism representing the social field and dwarfism is the libido?
I think how I read this, and again, it's again, how I'm reading this, because the phrasing of it, one sec, I wasn't quite there. Let me switch the page so everyone can know what I'm talking about. In the form of sexuality of the field of social production, the non-human sex in desiring production, the idea of the scale of the non-human sex is what I think he's referring to here, that the amount or scale of the desire that exceeds the familial categories, or I don't want to say exceeds because the opposite would be but it's kind of that thing that he's rephrasing here. Because because the way that the non-familial relation is primary, that field sexuality that is happening here, the social production, the sexuality that's happening there, which is a social force, not your own personal relation to it. This is manifests as like this non-human sex. The form of sexuality and field of sexual production, social production, and the non-human sex and desiring production, and the scale of that thing. Gigantism and dwarfism are... The wording's odd. We've had this discussion before. I've had people who have said that he's talking specifically about the way that the social object or the element we see either as gigantic or small. Other people have said that it's talking, because these tend to be ways of speaking of sort of the size of things that is non-human, even though they're both terms we very much use for humanism. We do talk about the gigantic or dwarf stars, dwarf trees, things like that. So it's talking about the non-human sex, the non-human side of it. This is a debatable thing as far as I'm concerned. I find it very odd language at the end there, to be frank, and I don't have an answer. We've had this debate a few times, I think, and I've never understood it necessarily. If anyone has an idea, feel free.
The thesis of schizoanalysis, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what the distinction between on the other hand, the social libidinal investment, right, and the paranoid and the reactionary and the fantasizing pole, right, to say, or schizoid reactionary pole, right? What is the distinction between that? Like,
You're gonna have
you're gonna
have to say slightly differently, because I'm not quite following what you're asking.
We are kind of like, what is the difference between the schizoanalysis, right? What is the distinction in schizoanalysis between the poles of social libidinal investment, right, and the paranoid and reactionary and fantasizing pole, right, and the schizoid revolutionary pole? Like, what is the distinction between them? Like, distinction.
For them, it's and again, this is an oversimplification of it, but it's a question of whether or not you privilege desiring production and emergence over the symbolic, the representational, and determinist sort of side of things. And that the reactionary is the paranoiac, the reaction to the representation. Representational thinking is reactionary versus revolutionary, which is necessarily emergent and based in desire and impulses. The model of the thing versus the emergence of desire around it, and the brush between the two of those.
Yeah.
Is how I read it. Again, just my thoughts. But it's like, because when we're talking about all this, like the point they're making here, and again, the theses of schizoanalysis, there's a few of them. And so I'm trying to also figure out which one you're talking about. If you're talking about this one specifically, they're really trying to put parents and family in its correct place, because they're not saying parents and family have no impact. That's, again, a lot of people come away from Deleuze and they go, oh, yeah, he just doesn't want us to care about representation at all. And it's like, no, he wants us to understand what representation does and how it works and how it can enslave us if we're not aware of it, blah, blah, blah. Like, and the same is, they're not pro-family. Don't get me wrong there. They're not like, oh, yeah, no, nuclear families are awesome. But it's like, hey, family like affects us in this way because of the nature of how social production operates. And family is not first. Social is first, and families play like the role of almost the filter or sluice or resonance of the social field that the child experiences and invests through them. So it's because the social field of desire is the actual organizer. The social field organizes. This is what determines libidinal investment patterns. The family is a reduction mechanism that reduces things to a person, a being, a moment, a thing, a relation, which channels this ridiculous amount of desire that exists into this neurotic closed circuit that the family is. And this is what basically, as they say, Oedipus such as Oedipus, that, I mean, just to skip it. Secondly, the parents as parents, is top of this page, are terms of application. That's a psychoanalytic word. It's a word from that space. Application is one of the paralogisms also. It's kind of an important continuous word. This expresses the reduction of the social field invested by libido to a finite aggregate of destination. So if you think of this insane, huge social field, just desires everywhere, it's doing a billion things. There's a billion social machines out there, all of that. And here's mom, right there. This huge social field is reduced and then invested by the child's libido in a finite aggregate of destination, where the destination finds nothing but impasses and blockages, consonant with the mechanisms of psychic and social repression active in this field. The field creates its own repression in the setup and in the way these things are found and in the way the child is then able to invest through the parents. The family is not the BWO. That is correct, Shaky. That's another fun one oh God. Oh, BWO. Such a fun one. But that's how I'd probably answer that. Because when we get through it, we have to remember the theses of all of this. And this is the thing at large. This is not the way schizoanalysis or the operants of it. These are the theses. So first we have that every investment is molar and social. It's gregarious. It's at large. It is the first thing. Every investment that exists with libido is social. Second thesis is the distinguishing of social investments of the preconscious of class or interest. So you have the unconscious libidinal investments of desire or group on one side, the nature of this libidinal investment of the social field. Two groups, role of sexuality, sexual revolutions in here. This is how these things play. Unconscious libidinal investment of desire or group, or preconscious investments of class or interest. This is the social investments happen in these ways. Third thesis, libidinal investment of the social field is primary in relation to familial investments. So this would be, Freud has a continuing thing about maids and moms and dads all the time. Freud loves this. Familialism is for him a universality. But this is what they're taking aim at. Instead, social investments are necessarily the thing first. And your family and everything sort of are symbols that reduce things afterwards. We'll get to the two poles of libidinal social investment, which is, I think, the fourth thing that's coming up really quick here. And that's kind of the setup. Does that answer your question at all? Even a slight bit?
Yeah, it answers. For clarification, Brooks, the primary would be kind of like libidinal investment, right? The primary with the social production, right? If I understand you coherently, if I'm understanding you well, like
I think so.
The primary investment, right? Before, like a priori, this kind of familiar relations or family before that, like prior to that, I guess, right? It's kind of like the family is not you have a tribal family. It's not like the nuclear family is the only family that you have, right? You have tribal family, you have like other families, like not
right.
all the families are the same, right?
Correct.
Like
well,
family
and
in
family,
America is not the same as in yeah.
Right. Well, and it's important to remember that, again, family, how it's invested, how you find those things. This is why they spend so much time going through Godelier, Strauss, and Grial, and all the time inside of chapter 3, explaining how the social systems at large, the socius, ultimately impinges on this and rebuilds this, because how we see family is also a product of social, but it's a particular product of how social arrangements operate. And again, still, always, in all of these, social investments are the primacy. You first And this is, again, against Freud for sure. For Freud, a child is unaware mostly of the rest of the world. They don't have an idea of what's happening out there. And this intuitively makes sense to a lot of people. You say things like, hey, the kid doesn't really go out and have a job. My son doesn't watch the news. He's 7. He's almost 8. But like, this is not how people exist in this way. And so, yeah, it makes sense that they would first understand family. And then when they go out in the real world, we say, oh, now you're in the real world and you get to do all these things. But that's not really how things operate. Mom and dad are obviously always playing also social roles, but it's not just that they're playing social roles. It's the way mom and dad operate, how they work, how they exist, that is within the social. And so they're almost play acting, but it's not quite play acting. And the child through them is investing in these larger social structures. The family comes second to this. The understanding that this is mom and dad is something that has to be taught, repressed, put in, or whatever. This is family is something that is put into you in a different way than just socially at large how you invest. And again, pre-conscious interest versus unconscious investment is the center of that.
So, can you clarify the priority of pre-conscious and the unconscious investments? Does pre-conscious come first?
No. So the unconscious investments. Well, I mean, first is going to be really tough for this because there is sort of an imminence to how desire is invested. But the social investments, the pre-conscious interests have to come after because they're understandings of very particular social relations. And again, more of a, hey, this is the class I belong to. This is a poor woman, a rich woman, an over-sexualized woman, or a young man, or white or black. Those are pre-conscious interests. Those come necessarily after. But again, after is going to be a really specific and troublesome word to use from this, I would say. But I would probably be forced to say after and then try to figure out if I'm wrong. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I was trying to understand which one is more basic, or seems like, yeah, okay.
Well, basic is going to be, again, these things are always going. The most basic is desire as it is, purely emergently, not connected, not invested. It's totally non-human sex. Totally non-human sex is desire and the impulses and things like that. So the unconscious investment in the group is primary. The pre-conscious investment of interest is going to be secondary. It's a slight different push. As they talk about, people act out against their objective class interests because their unconscious libidinal investment overrides it. They say the phrase they use is, when subjects, individuals, or group manifestly go against class interest, it's not an ideological problem or misrecognition. It's a problem of desire, and desire is part of that infrastructure. And so when you start talking about that unconscious investment, it's at the level of flux or impulse. These are the things at the base of it. And so this is why the revolutionary problem exists, because the revolution can happen. Investment of fascist or reactionary types can coexist with revolutionary conscious investment. This ultimately means that you can consciously be revolutionary, pre-consciously, I guess, but unconsciously investing in fascist formations of power. And so the primary or secondary there is going to be the setup. Now, again, that one happens and then the second happens is going to be, I think, that's not quite what we're wanting to say. Like, it's not one and then the other, but there is a primariness, an imminence of one versus the other. One is less socially constructed and sort of outright, but again, it's tough. Pre-conscious investments are going to be rational calculations, the intellectualizing of class position, economic goals or outcomes, political programs. These are the pre-conscious interests that you have. This is that investment. Unconscious investments is the social formations your desire actually cathects in, invests in. It's what makes you fucking, as they even say, get hard. What you find libidinally satisfying, regardless of rational interest. So that's, again, first or second, less so primary or secondary, we can probably say, because they do use that language a lot for those guys. Because that's the phrase they use, that it's one of my favorites. It's not by metaphor that Hitler made fascists get hard, right? It's not by metaphor that a banking or stock market operations makes people get hard who are not only bankers. There are complexes, economico-social, which are veritable complexes of the unconscious. Aroused is fine. I prefer saying get hard because I think it's funny. But it is aroused, I think, in the original. But they use a couple different versions of it because they erect. I think they actually use erect for that one because they're trying to make a commentary on building, but it doesn't matter. The point is that the unconscious libidinal investment is what allows people to desire their own oppression, because they find fascist formations exciting, arousing, and that lets them invest in capitalism even when they are wholly aware they're being exploited in every single way. And so that puts it in, for me, the foundational level that determines how preconscious interests become organized and then expressed.
Yeah, that explains why Trump keeps getting reelected.
Yeah, and it's also how it comes about. So unconscious investment is, think of it as, and it's hard. I'm really trying not to think of how Klosowski talks about it, but Klosowski, when he's talking about this kind of stuff, uses different wording very much, but he talks about sort of desire and impulses creating almost and investing in an image, and an image is not a picture, but like the leavings affectively of an experience that sort of are still there. And then what happens
would you say that's called an impression?
No, it's close. It is close, but it is. He's very specific in it because for him the image is a phantasm, and the phantasm, the fantasy. But it's impression-like, but it's more complex than that because it has a lot more angles of things. So it is built off that, so it's close. But but again, it's not an image in the sense of like a photograph. Oh, I remember this day, because it is sort of us saying, that's because these are 6 white people were here and 2 black people were here. That's why I had a good day or a bad day. That's not really the point. That comes first, these images. The secondary thing that happens is over time, as these images show up and as we exist socially, we learn from people around us. We learn how we talk. We learn where we belong, where we can walk, where we can drive, where we're allowed to go, we're not allowed to go. And we learn our position in society through a series of secondary relations. Secondary relations impart on us our preconscious interest, because we start to learn where we're at socially. We start to understand it. It's more of a rationalized, intellectualized thing, but the image, the imago, the things that are playing inside of that, the fantasies that are powering all of that, the impulses are continually flowing through and finding ways to be attracted into.
Well, that sounds very, very, very close to the Lacanian phantasm itself.
It is.
So
it is very much the same thing.
Okay. Well,
I shouldn't say that. It's the same wording, and it comes from literally the same people, and they use it the same in a lot of ways. But Lacan is doing something different than Klosowski, and I think, to me, what Guattari has done is he is taking Klosowski's version and Lacan's version and ultimately synthesized what I think are the best versions of them to talk about this thing where it's like, hey, the structures and arrangements of elements that you are invested in, that you like desire and the impulses pulse through. This is the phantasm. But what's happening is that happens, and it's like constantly like the heartbeat of desire, constantly out and in, finding ways to fill itself and then back in, out and in and out and in. And over time, again, socially, we become repressed externally. Mom says, you can't touch that. Kids aren't allowed in here. Sorry, son, you're the wrong age. Actually, you're in the Brown reading group. You have to go into the stupid little tenement in the back where we put the dumb kids. Oh, actually, it's because you're a black kid. That's why we don't have you in the nicer classes. As these things happen and you start to socially understand your position, that's that secondary thing.
Okay. Well, to be honest, I still think the word impression actually described this pretty well, because it does.
It might. I mean,
but it might be because I have a few different languages in my head and then I understand it differently. But please continue.
Is there a text that you're specifically thinking of taking it from? I mean, just because.
No, it's more of my.
Oh, you're talking about just like the word. Sorry, I was thinking you were talking about
word, because in Spanish, the impression is much closely to, it's like the thing that was left behind after something is pressed again.
Yeah, if we're talking in that sense of how an impression, in the sense of like literally like an impression in sand or things like that, you're much closer to the image, because it's what's left behind is not the hand or the footprint. Like the foot, it's the print. It's the impression of it, the power or the forces of things, and the leave behind of that forces. Yes.
It does explicitly kind of point out that you have a original image, almost mechanistic, and then you have another thing that's secondary. I do think this word actually points to. I don't know how native English speakers understand this word, but at least in Spanish, it very much points to the double size. But
it's a deeply contextual word. For English, it's a deeply contextual word. So when you talk about like again, like I was saying, like the impression someone leaves by laying in a couch too long, that's the correct usage. But the impression someone gets of a thing, people tend to use it as like the reduction of it to an almost small element. Oh, that's my impression of the story is that it's kind of fun. It's like, that's not. So again, English is funny that way.
It might simply because I have different languages in my head, but yeah, please continue.
Hi, Brooks.
Hello. It's been a while, Josh. How you
Josh.
doing?
I'm good, but out of sight, but not out of mind. And
well, always welcome.
I run everything. I run everything through AI now. And I was having a little debate with AI on which you were just talking about, because I got it into my head that anything unconscious for Deleuze and Guattari took you into the realm of the virtual. And on the virtual, nothing on the order of a striated or a fascist, form could be produced. So that I kind of ran that through, and what I got was, of course, it complimented me first. I love how it compliments. It loves me, I can do.
If you
no
haven't
wrong.
watched the new South Park, I highly recommend the new South Park. I highly recommend the new South Park. It's very,
shatter my
good.
illusions.
It's very good. I also recommend my videos on AI, so you can understand that you should not be doing this with it. Because one of the challenges is, for example, just real quick to say, the unconscious and the pre-conscious or conscious and the virtual and actual do not have a line running through them the same way in any capacity.
Maybe, let's see how far off. Unconscious is not a repository image, is a representation for productive virtual field of intensity differentials. So I know it's just sort of aping what I had given it there, but this is the virtual unconscious, non-representational, non-striated. And so in this sense, you're right. It says fascism cannot be produced on the virtual itself because the virtual is not yet organized into the forms. But
that's not true.
You always stress the movement from virtual. Really?
Yeah. So again, fascism can't be something that exists in the virtual, because if we go, that's fascism. We've actualized a thing by speaking power to it and putting it into a concretized element. But in the moment we do that, it is actualized, but moments after, it becomes virtual again, because the actual is not actually something that like sticks around. The actual is socially determined elements. So for example, if you wanted to say that social machines are actualized desire, I actually could have an interesting conversation with you about that, because social machines are necessarily desire machines under determinate conditions. And as such, the virtual is collapsed into the actual for that moment, but immediately becomes also re-virtualized within moments. The interaction of these two is drastically different than unconscious to preconscious to, it's not, the lines don't work the same way. It's, they don't clear in the same. It's like talking about how, temperature and how water boils. It's the same line. And it's like, no, pressure affects that, and this fucks everything. Like, there's other crisscrossing things that make it more complex than just saying it's always that.
Okay.
So, like, for example, in the unconscious, one can very much be fully invested into fascism. Is it fascism in the unconscious? Well, no. The desire is invested into the into the arrangements that produce it. But I would say that they have a fascizing desire. Like, they have a fascizing unconscious. They are fascizing. So that thing becomes like, even in preconscious, by the way, preconscious people tend not to be like invested in fascism. So if that, like, that's not, there are people like that. I know they exist. There are people who are proudly fascist. We've seen them, but that tends not to be people. People unconsciously are invested in fascism, but they preconsciously are invested in their own class, the structure, how they see themselves, even freedom, but they may be absolutely internally invested in fascism. And that has nothing to do with the actual or the virtual either. What I just said.
Like, for example, the who's the the deputy who's kind of like long, like we covered this, right? There's a sheriff who kind of like ordered, like, do you remember the American guy who kind of sent to the prison in Ecuador, right? Or in Bukele, under Bukele. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you remember this person? This kind of person. I don't know about the United States, but do you remember, Brooks, the person, the sheriff, or the guy who's kind of like did the conference with the wife, right? With the wife who's kind of, this guy, like I never expect from him that he kind of has this response, right? I never expect from him that he will kind of say that like I expect from him that he would be with Trump, right? In line with Trump. But I never expect with him that
again,
he will,
yes, no, I know what you're talking about, and I'll even say one of the things that's important to remember is Trump is also not something to reduce. There is and I think it's one of the reasons I come back to, and I find this level of argumentation when we're talking about the unconscious or preconscious and how investment works so deeply satisfying to explain the political predictions and moments we're in. Trump himself or his followers aren't like, fascism's sexy, I want it. Like, they're unconsciously invested in the fascizing elements of things. They're the idea of racial purity. They're invested in these things. Now, if you ask a lot of them, very much, if you asked a lot of them, hey, are all Mexicans evil? They'll be like, no. Are all illegals evil? Yes. But then when did you know Pedro is illegal? No. Like, there's the way they break things down, the way they understand things, how they're playing with it, where their rage is coming from. You can see it in a lot of different ways. The January 6th is another great example where you had all these people who outside of the Capitol were, fucking beating people to death and trampling them and destroying doors. And then as soon as they're inside, they stayed inside of the velvet ropes. And like, it was fucking wild to watch because you could see and watch their rage and everything turn into impotence and repression inside of understanding their actual investments. And they were they outwardly were saying whatever they're going to say, but they couldn't quite get over that. That these elements is really fascinating. But to go back to Josh, I don't think the unconscious and the imperceptible would be a great thing to relate. I don't think it helps, because the perceptible is one, the unconscious has indices. They're perceptible. What you mean by perceptible is going to be a really complex question. But they're outlining a way for us to have a discussion where we can see the attractant or repulsive elements within various things as things go. They're two different setups almost entirely for different types of analysis. The virtual and actual is like an ontological temporal analysis on that. So if we wanted to do that with the virtual, we'd say the Oedipus complex, virtual. It's a reactive formation, but it's a formation that is virtual. The potential elements that are there inside of the virtual is awaiting the time to be actualized. So it's potential. That's great. The undecidable, the dependent, the secondary, all of these things are emergent from or dependent on, but not quite actualized. When we move to the actual, when we say desiring production, we do mean the actual, because we're talking about desiring production as an active process. When we talk about things that are contemporaneous with other elements, these are actual. That this is why it's tough. This is why it's tough. Actual is not about being more recent. They have a quote. Deleuze has a quote about this. I can't remember quite where. Because it's not about saying what used to be. The actual is not because it's the most recent or the oldest. Oh yes, the United States is actual. That's not because it's been around longer and the other things are virtual, waiting to coalesce. Very often people think of time and existence as the possible is in front of us that collapses into the real, and the real is this long chain behind us, and that's what people think the actual is. This is not really how it works. The actual is within the virtual, being consistently actualized as time is passing and going, like as the wheels are turning, and immediately being turned back into. And so it's going to be really specific to remember they're very different. And I'd be very hesitant to sort of, like, they intersect and there's cool discussions to have, but they're not the same thing.
You can find this kind of, I remember that in different repetition. You can find that between the relation between the virtual and the actual, I think.
And the time image and movement image, cinema series, and Bergsonism. And I mean, there's a few. He goes into a few. I was just reading fantastic set on God damn it. Yeah, sorry, I'll stop. I could go on because it's interesting, but it's the play is very different.
The way that I was
correct, Brooks.
No, Marcellus, 1 second.
The way I was understanding the virtual was that everything that you get from sort of eternal return of the different in Nietzsche, you find realized in the virtual. That is, that every quantitative change is at the same time a qualitative change. That's where everything's different. It's always different. It's only when you actualize that things freeze into qualities where you can delineate their parts and you can count. You can calculate increments of things, and that's where you have these forms and striations and all these complex organizational systems that are sort of reify themselves, that have a stability, that stick around for a while. That the dipping into the virtual is always dipping into immediate transformation. But what was always confusing to me was how this back and forth is supposed to be understood.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy one. And again, I may be off, so don't take what I'm saying as like God's word for fuck's sake. But when we're talking about, like, as I understand it, when we're talking about the actual, we're talking about the shit that is in action, being concretized. The process right now of you hearing my words. I am giving voice to the complexity of potentials that are behind me, the impulses that are flowing up, and I'm turning them into actuals. Again, Klosowski, I think, has a really great way of synthesizing all this, but that's our Thursday reading. But like, we're constantly in this space of the actual, but the actual doesn't become the stable. That because necessarily the actual is the thing that is only in action, in process, happening, like the concretizing thing. Once it's concrete, whoop, up it goes again. And it's like out, once it's done and we're like moved on, that thing existing is now dependent on the actual, because we only understand it through the things that are being concretized. The actual doesn't have dependence. This is one of the things Deleuze goes on really huge about. The actual is basically independent of all the rest of it. The virtual is very much secondary and very much responsive and requires other process to be manifested.
Yeah, difference in repetition sort of sticks in my mind where, he talks about qualities and extensities, and qualities and extensities are actualizations. It's only there, it's only in the actual that you get qualities and extensities. You don't get them in the virtual because intensities you can't count instances of an intensity, because that means that a quality has to sit there for you. It has to hold itself steady so that you can count increments of it. And that, to me, was what was key about actualization. Materiality, right? That's what people associate with the actual, or we'll call it the real. But materiality, that things, objects, they have to sit there so they have to persist so that you can measure them, right? And that's
sort of. And this is why Bergson, I think, is really important for this, because for Bergson, where he does really get, I think, the brunt of this, and he explains it really well in his book Bergsonism. But Bergson's Matter and Memory is where Bergson goes into the idea of the virtual, the actual, and actualization, where we have the virtual, which is this, the virtual for Bergson is pure memory, which basically is saying like, memory, or the past, the totality of the past, actually shapes the potential of the future. And with that, the actual is the present action, what is actualized from the multiplicity of that potential. And so as such, we only are able to do things, or we only understand the potentiality of things based on things that have actualized. There is a really specific sort of cyclic process for this, because it is about the sort of selection and contraction of the virtual into the actual, and then the actual conditioning the virtual. Because again, the past, as you're describing it, which is, as I understand it, how you're describing it, I get a measurement, I have a quality, I get this. I don't keep that like in like the actual. I take that and I go, oh, eureka, and off I go to other things. And that thing that was actual a moment ago now returns to the virtual, becomes part of that memory and the totality of the past as the potential for future actions. And so, again, the whole reason that this matters for this, and for this paragraph even specifically, is because when we're talking about how people commonly talk about these elements, we tend to talk about Oedipus, the structure actually determines the derivative effects of desiring production, that the structure builds you out. But desiring production, which is the actual process of things, has a virtual derivative of that in Oedipus. And with that, we end up getting neurotic symptoms as that derivative product, the virtual derivative, that pure memory, that totality falls back onto and comes back into the ability for things to be determined. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to do stuff that Oedipus allows, because everything else isn't allowed anymore. It's not part of it. It's either barred from existence or it was never allowed in the first place. A child who is never allowed to do X, Y, and Z and learns, in fact, it's great pain to do X, Y, and Z, will never do X, Y, and Z. They don't see it as possible. They don't see it as potential. They don't see it as anything because it's not in their virtual space. It's not in their pure memory. The actual is only made of those things. Now, we can have moments where that ends up expanding and growing, obviously. Like, there's a lot of really cool ways that sets up, but that's the deal here, is that the neurotic symptoms, the schizophrenic or autistic symptoms of subjectivity of people is the actualization of the actual process of desiring production through the virtual derivative and filter and structures of everything to make that neurotic symptom in the first place.
What do you make of this? This is where Deleuze is talking about Bergson, and where I was inclined to sort of to see this in terms of a virtual actual distinction. And he says, I have to figure out later, I have Deleuze 87. I don't know, I forget which work that is, but probably difference of repetition. He says, Bergson presents duration as a type of multiplicity opposed to metric multiplicity, or the multiplicity of magnitude. Duration is in no way indivisible, but is that which cannot be divided without changing in nature at each division. On the other hand, a multiplicity such as homogeneous extension, the division can be carried as far as one likes without changing anything in the constant object, or the magnitudes can vary with no other result than an increase or decrease in the amount of space they striate. Bergson thus brought to light two very different kinds of multiplicity. One, qualitative and fusional, continuous, the other numerical and homogeneous, discrete. It will be noted that matter goes back and forth between the two. Sometimes it is already enveloped in qualitative multiplicity, sometimes already developed in a metric schema that draws it outside of itself. So how would you relate this to sort of virtual actual or smooth striated?
I would aim right at and just say logic of sense, and specifically his sections on time, Chronos and Aeon, I think is where he does. To me, this is like directly addressing what you're talking about, because he talks about how within sense and how sense is produced, we have two types of time, and time works as he's taken from Bergson here very much, but he's taking also, as Bergson is, from the Stoics. And there's Corey Shores on his blog has an amazing translation of Goldschmidt's The Idea of Pure Time, something like that. It's an old text that he translated from French. It's worth reading. But basically the way he talks about it is that there is aeon, as he calls it, or talks about it, is the infinitely divisible time, where I can say tomorrow or next week or 5 minutes from now, or I can consider the stages within which things change, and I do so as slices of it, versus Chronos, which is the eternally recurring now, the moment we're in right now that seems like, and if you focus on it, it seems like it will never end. And then at some point you have a moment where you remember something else. And actually that broke up this, like, but Chronos like restarts immediately as it's misunderstood or understood. This process that we move back and forth between the two of them is the point. And that's for me, I think you might find a good answer inside of that. But I would also point out just real quick, that the definition we're using of the virtual and the actual would actually make a extremely good point about why the AI has no concept of anything, because it does not have a virtual. So you do, and it's utilizing the virtual, you're utilizing the virtual of your experience to give actualization to its words and to give its words meaning. It doesn't do that. It doesn't have that. So it's fun that way. It's weird that way, but it's fun that way. It's a good, useful tool for some things, but yeah, so just be careful. I don't know where we were or what I was talking about pre. Maybe we just do a random call-in stream and we just talk about random shit. But let's see if I can bring this back. See if I can bring it back to this. Maybe I can't. Now my brain is in a completely different space now.
Oh, you're talking about unconscious versus preconscious interest, and that we got off on that tangent of what.
Right.
The unconscious.
But it's tough to go back because now I'm one of the things, and please join our Thursday reading for Klosowski. But Klosowski's take on this, I think, again, is incredibly brilliant, and I think personally, I have found myself applying a lot of what he wrote to AO, and it has opened up doors in terms of what Deleuze is getting at and how these things function, because they are taking a deeply, deeply psychoanalytic turn, but their materialist psychiatry that they build here, which I believe is incredibly effective, if that's added to what Klosowski is doing, because for Klosowski, the eternal return is the shift between the model of things, or what you would call the paranoiac, what you would call the actual, the virtual, the model, the things that are allowed, versus the experience you're going to go have, and that we oscillate between these. You oscillate between experience and then the model of that experience. That is an incredibly powerful way to consider what virtual and actual means, but also unconscious and preconscious, and how we interact not just with ourselves, but with time and with everything. These would be the things I would probably push towards. But like, there's a couple things I want to make sure we do go over here, because I do want to try to read a second paragraph. I would like to read a second paragraph if it's possible. But I think there's a phrasing. One sec, I want to make sure I get it right. Where was it? It's in my notes. Yeah, we'll go right before that one. So we'll do it like the middle here. In accordance with, so this is a long one, but it's basically the bottom of 355 if you want to read along. In accordance with the distinction made by embryologists with regard to the egg between the stimulus and organizer, parents are stimuli having an indifferent value that trigger the allocations of gradients or zones of intensity on the BWO. I'm going to stop there just real quick. As we understand embryological science, this was deeply cutting edge for Deleuze at the time, but it is kind of rote stuff now. If you're not aware of how kind of nature and nurture don't exist really, and how there's a lot of really odd ways that these things actually interact contingently and build contingently. When he's talking here, he's talking about how stimuli in embryos trigger development, yes, but organizers, DNA, and other materials that are in the area determine the actual specific form. Parents in all of this, as he's talking about, are this arbitrary stimuli. And so they activate intensity distributions on things, on the BWO, the pre-personal, pre-organized body. Parents matter as markers of social difference. Within these social determinations, they appear, or reappear, you should say, not as parents, but instead social positions. We don't actually relate as dad, as like everything dad is, but instead his social position in relation to everything. That's what he reappears as inside of this. And the parent has an effect. They have an effect. They are stimuli, but they have an indifferent value that triggers the allocations of gradients or zones of intensity on the BWO. It's a big different shift. And the organizer is the social field of desire, just to continue, which alone designates, it's at the bottom, which alone designates the zones of intensity, and with all the beings that populate these zones and determine their libidinal investment. Again, the organizer, which is, again, how we talk about, they're using terms from embryology and developmental science. But again, this is the social field. The organizer is the social field of desire. The social field of desire, as they're phrasing it. It's not the family. The field determines how libidinal energy is distributed, how it is invested. It is not the individual family dynamics. The family exists in this social field, and beings within these zones are positioned by social organization first. Your family, even if you're incredibly wealthy, your family doesn't determine where it's positioned socially. Socially determines where your family is positioned. It's flipping a lot on its head. We commonly talk about the wealthy choosing their position. Oh, the wealthy earning their position, finding their spot. Oh, they put themselves in this place. But that's absurd for a lot of reasons. What's happening is the social field determines their position. And then we do the thing where we say, hey, I deserve this. It's the meme of the guy says, hey, hold this. And then he goes, I made this. It's I made this. That's you and family and everyone. We do this a lot. We say, oh, I made myself wealthier. Oh, I made myself enter a new social group. No, the social field does that and enables that and puts that in place. You're reacting to it and claiming it. Correct, Estelle. That would be the one. I made this. You made this? I made this. That's the setup. That's the setup. Like across the board. And this is, if you want to go back, this is Marx's social formulation theory all the way through. And you can find this in Spinoza. You can find this in Foucault. This is not an abnormal thing, but it is a big, big deal. Is capitalism nomad? No, we don't. Nick Land, we don't talk about. We mourn his brain cells that methate. And that's actually the big thing I wanted to kind of get through, because I want to get to this next paragraph. So is everyone following, generally speaking? Because it's a big shift, and it is, again, one of the main theses as they talk about it. The third thesis: libidinal investment operates primarily at the social level, not familial level. Parents are not autonomous familial agents happening to be in the social position they're in, but instead they are almost arbitrary existences within this larger social productive network that defamilializes them, gives them other relations, builds them in other ways within this larger social productive framework. And so with this, desire in the social field is the organizer that determines libidinal investment patterns. The family reduces things. It's a reduction mechanism that channels this massive, infinite social desire into closed, tiny cutoff, neurotic circuits. They use this phrase a lot. This is why this is the thing. And this interaction is the fuck up of understanding, oh, that's Oedipus, because it's not. Like, that's, again, that's not the thing. This is the fundamental critique. Is it true Steiner? No. I mean, a lot of people had a lot of ideas, multiplicities before Deleuze. I don't understand. Nietzsche came before Deleuze. Leibniz came before Deleuze. Spinoza, and I mean, Spinoza and his substance, keep going back. We can find more. The Stoics, like pre-Socratics even, you can find that. Makes me want to ask a question about free will, but I'm concerned to be off topic. It is off topic. But you're free to, post those elsewhere. I have a large thing about free will on YouTube. I already answered that one. And it might answer. It's a more succinct response.
Do you think that the terms that psychiatry use, right, to kind of like investigate the social unconscious, do you think that these are part of the problem, like the terms that they use also, right?
Look, it's going to be real. It's a really tough thing to answer, because it means, what do you mean by part of the problem? They are part of the problem in the sense that people take them deeply seriously, but as they go on to say, there are people who exist who have an Oedipal complex, who want to fuck their mom and kill their dad. Like that, To say that is impossible or that doesn't exist, that's not what they're doing. And they're not saying that. They're like, look, that may exist. We're talking about like the a priori existence of these things. We're talking about this being the determinate way of every human organism. That they're against. So if we want to say the problem, it's not so much the terms. It's not even so much the stuff that comes out of it. It's that we take representation and we subjugate desiring production and emergence to it. And by doing so, we collapse the potential field, the way it can grow, into these tiny specific things. And lo and behold, it's trying to do everything. As I've said, and I would think they would agree, if you don't find a use for your desire, you'll find a use for your desire. And that, I think, is underlying what they're talking about, the way that desire ultimately becomes this neurotic familial thing. It's the same process, but it's not the name or the setup. It's the way that subjectivity is created now produces people who necessarily subjugate desire to representation instead of the other way around.
Okay.
I'm going to try to get through the next paragraph in the next 40 minutes. We'll probably end up doing it again next week because if you're not aware, and I probably am saying this every week at this point, the last section of the book usually takes about as long as almost the rest of the book, because it is them bringing all of it together. So it's a lot of, hey, here's this from this place. Hey, here's this from this place. Here's this. And so there is so much density and complexity that in order to make your way through it, you do have to really spend time reading it. So we'll end up rereading this one next week, but this is continuing the thing. Keep in mind, as we make our way through this, the big thrust underneath all of it. Estelle, you are going to get... keep in mind the way that Oedipal dynamics interplay, how the social field works, how women and moms are reduced, and how the paralogism of application takes place here. See how, as I read, and we're going to be doing this anyway, that sexual conflicts, because those exist as a thing, you can't assume one's sex. Sex is, sorry everyone, sex is also socially created. It's not just gender. All of these things, though, are symptoms of economic dependence first, the primacy of economic or social dependence, instead of being, it's about sex first and then we find dependence later. Does that make sense? I hope it does. If it doesn't, we're going to make our way through it. Don't worry. One often has the impression that families have understood the lesson of psychoanalysis only too well, even far off, or by osmosis, in the air of the times. They play at Oedipus, a sublime alibi. But behind all this, there is an economic situation. The mother reduced to housework or to a difficult and uninteresting job on the outside. Children whose future remains uncertain. The father who's had it with feeding all these mouths. In short, a fundamental relation to the outside of which the psychoanalyst washes his hands, too attentive to seeing that his clients play nice games. Now, the economic situation, the relation to the outside, is what the libido invests and counter-invests as sexual libido. One gets off on flux and the brakes in these flux. Let us consider for a moment the motivations that lead someone to be psychoanalyzed. It involves a situation of economic dependence that has become unbearable for desire, or full of conflicts for the investment of desire. The psychoanalyst who says so many things about the necessity for money in the cure remains supremely indifferent to the question of who is footing the bill. For example, the analysis reveals the unconscious conflicts of a woman with her husband, but the husband is paying for his wife's analysis. This isn't the only time we encounter the duality of money as a structure of external financing and as a means of internal payment, along with the objective dissimulation that it comprises, essential to the capitalist system. But it is interesting to find this essential concealment miniaturized, occupying a place of honor in the analyst's office. The analyst talks about Oedipus, about castration and the phallus, about the necessity of assuming one's sex, as Freud says. So I want to make sure I'm still in the middle of the page. Yeah, as Freud says, the human sex and the necessity for the woman to renounce her desire for the penis and the man to renounce his male protest. We maintain that there is not one woman, more particularly not one child, who can as such assume her or his situation in a capitalist society, precisely because this situation has nothing to do with the phallus and castration, but directly concerns an unbearable economic dependence. And the woman and the children who succeed in assuming do so only by detours and determinations completely distinct from their being woman and their being child. Nothing to do with phallus, but much to do with desire, with sexuality as desire. For the phallus has never been either the object or the cause of desire, but is itself the castrating apparatus, the machine for putting lack into desire, for drawing up all the flux, and for making all the breaks from the outside and from the real into one and the same break with the outside, with the real. It's a really good paragraph, by the way. I think it's a little bit more pointed than a lot more. So to open, one often has the impression that families have understood the lessons of psychoanalysis only too well, even far off or by osmosis, in the air of the times. They play at Oedipus a supreme alibi. We're culturally absorbed in Oedipus, or psychoanalysis, you could say. How many people talk about Trump's daddy issues or blah, blah, blah? Like, come on. Like, we see this stuff all the time, and also families happily play into it. The Oedipal dynamics are the excuse. Like, they're almost meta-aware of what's happening. And so as they're meta-aware, it's, hey, this is just, I can't help, this is just the way it is. This is the thing. It's their supreme alibi. And it's not really a conscious deception, not really that thing, but instead, again, culturally elevated forms of mystification. And that's a big deal for them, because as families are allowed to avoid confronting the material conditions of themselves, they do so by engaging in psychoanalytic theater. And this is to touch into ideology a little bit. This is where they're starting to bring in a lot more of Marx's German ideology, the way that the material practice of things produces it, that it's not just a false consciousness. Again, they're really, 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 really pulling in a lot of Marx here, like a shit ton of it. A shit ton of it. But behind all this...
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
There's a specific page about desire, I think, in the critique of Max Stirner in the German ideology. I think there is a specific page. I don't remember where I call it, but like there is a specific page where Marx talk the same as Deleuze about desire, which is the indifferent aspect of desire as such, right? Roughly like that.
It's very close, and it's I highly recommend it. I mean, again, there's a reason that I talk about Deleuze. I mean, a lot of people do. Doing Marx more than Marx. He's extremely Marxist in a lot of what he talks about. And this is where a lot of that starts, again, coming back in. But to continue real quick. But behind all this, the play we were just talking about, there is an economic situation. I hope everyone can empathize with this. The mother's reduced to housework. difficult or shitty job. The children, I'm just going to skip it. I'm just going to summarize. Children who have no idea what the future is going to be. Anyone able to identify with that? The father who's had it with feeding all these mouths. I hate this fucking job. The only reason I'm there and making money is to make sure that you keep a roof over your fucking heads. That kind of shit. There's all of this. There is, in all of it, a fundamental relation to the outside, and psychoanalysts, and I think a huge number of clinicians in general, wash their hands of that. That this is, oh, no. We need you to play nice games. We need you to work within these things. We need you to play. The French is jouer gentiment, which is more. It's not really play nice games. It's more play, because again, in English, nice means like happy. This is proper games. Like play nicely, children. That kind of thing. Like think of it as a British accent saying, play nice games, children. It's more that.
Brooks, I don't know why. Before you say the word British, I literally thought the same thing.
Well, it's because the British are the most of this. Absolutely.
Yeah, where all of my friends in high fashion talks about the recent trends in somewhere in Europe. It's like, okay, I mean, it's good on skinny white girls. That's about it. Like, that's literally all they can say. Like I literally am like, I was literally having their sarcastic like head in my mind, and then you said it's the British. It's the weirdest thing ever.
Yeah, it's children. Please play properly, because kids fuck with stuff. Like, and it comes to mind because this happened the other day at a park. My son made friends with this adorable girl who had like giant personality, and they're running around and doing stuff and having fun. And this other kid came over and he started splashing him with water, and the mom grabbed him. Like my son got very upset. He's like, stop doing that. And the kid wouldn't. And Dexter's very upset, and he didn't do anything about it. He came to me and he said, you said to get an adult. It's very nice. And I said, just watch, just give it a moment. And the mom came over, grabbed her son, like yanked him by the arm. And as I said to Dexter, I was like, hey, that kid was being an asshole, but he's an asshole because watch his mom. And mom screams and says, you need to learn how to play with people the right way. It's like, that's fuck you. Like they're doing it. This is the setup. You need to learn how to play with people the right way, not, emergently deal with it or anything else. It's the nice way, the proper way. And the psychoanalyst, very common. It's extremely common that you'll go into clinic sessions, you'll go into therapy sessions, and they will want to talk about how you exist and how you feel about things, but they won't go, hey boy, there's this like huge economic nightmare pressure behind everything you're doing. There's labor exploitation. There's uncertainty thanks to literally everything. There's reproductive rights being taken away from everyone or enforced on people. Economic nightmares are around every corner. But can we talk about your dad? Like that is kind of the fuck it. We just toss it out. But the family exists socially. They're in capitalist social relations necessarily. When the psychoanalyst washes their hands, they're Pontius Pilate washing their hands of material conditions and the capitalist system, of which, by the way, as they make jokes throughout the book, they're very happy to deal with the financial thing as long as you make sure that you pay for your hour and a half, and they keep the clock running exactly spot on and stop you when they need to, because why let you get an extra 30 seconds of free psychotherapy? That is kind of a lot of their sort of jokes. That's the next line. Now the economic situation, the relation outside is what the libido invests and counter invests as sexual libido. Sexual libido is bodily charged. When we think about sexual, libido is not really invested in family members. That's not how it works. It's not where we start. Libido and desire are invested in economic relations, like directly. That's the thing. But
wait,
yeah.
Brooks,
Yeah.
let me just, because you mentioned economics, just search Chanel haute couture online. you will know exactly what I'm talking about. The proper rich lady from a rich family. Like, that's the thing that my friends were
I can't
talking about.
believe that's what's happening right now. And it is
Uh,
100% what's happening right now. That's awful.
Yeah, just search.
Also, black and white and no colors, of course.
Just search any kind of British haute couture. It's
It's awful. It's awful. Fashion's terrible now. I want to go back to the weird days where they like had inflatable pelican heads and shit on their butts. Like, I want weird. Give me weird. Anyway, it's so depressing. Fashion is supposed to be like this oh God, how awful. Anyway, the connection to the outside. That's like the thrust of this. The libido invests sexually directly in the social relations of capital. But this is cathected, broken, counter-sected. And as such, the counter-investment exists. The libido can invest both for and against the same economic formation. You can love and hate capitalism simultaneously through this sort of cathexis that's happening. And as such, you have this really kind of weird sexual push. They say one gets off on flux and the brakes in these flux. There is a directly invested sexual experience and dimension of economic investment. That gets off. They mean come. You come. It's come. You come. You get off. You flux on flux or with flux is kind of the setup that they're talking about. There's straight up sexual arousal and jouissance from the economic process. The way capital moves, the way commodities move, information moves, their interruptions, the cuts of these things. This is, again, not metaphorical. This is actual libidinal cathexis of economic processes. Hitler aroused people with his flag. Accountants are aroused by as they run their fingers through the files. That people are aroused in this way, straight up, finding jouissance in here. This is Lacan through Bataille, and I would say Bataille straight away, and Grundrisse. Like, this is hardline, classic materialist talk about these things. But it's turned against psychoanalysis here because they say, let us consider for a moment the motivations that lead someone to be psychoanalyzed. Take for a second, why does someone go there? What are the motivations someone could possibly have? Well, it's because they're in a situation of economic dependence that has become unbearable for desire, or full of conflicts for the investment of desire. People do this not because of Oedipalized conflicts, not really, but it's because they have this fucked up economic dependence that creates conflicts in how they can invest their desire. Their motivation necessarily is material desperation disguised as psychological symptoms. And this is, if you go back through Freud, and that's why we spent time with Wolfman earlier and all this shit through Freud, you can see this. This is not, all of these people are having really difficult times with money, or they're finding themselves filled with conflicts of how they are sexually aroused by money in various ways. The way that reproduction has become merged with the economic system. And again, if you want to go back and make this a biological argument, we can, because they have. When we existed tribally, the way we reproduced or produced was by having children, by fucking. Our fucking made kids. Who we fucked made kids with people and made alliances. Our sexuality as humans in that phase of things, in that early tribal phase, is directly economic. There's no difference. That we didn't have it extricated. Sexuality in the social sphere was economic. That's it, period. You fuck the wrong person, you get the wrong person pregnant, you marry the wrong person, it's bad for the whole tribe, everyone. So you were invested directly sexually in economic situations. The despotic, people become directly fetishizing of the king or queen who ends up becoming that economic. Like, this is not hard to understand or have a conversation around if you realize they're not being metaphorical. This is not some Freudian, money represents that. It's like, no. people are directly sexually invested in these things, and they show it, and it gets repressed, it gets sublimated, it gets interrupted within capital and played in various different ways. And this repressive process adjusts it and aims it in different ways. The mom, for example, because mom is only ever clearly this reduced simple thing, but actually it's all of this stuff. The psychoanalyst who says so many things about the necessity for money in the cure remains supremely indifferent to the question of who is footing the bill. How money gets into that thing doesn't matter. The psychoanalyst doesn't give a fuck about the history of that money, where it came from, whose labor it is, how it was from exploitation, where it was cured. Is it the person who you're visiting? They don't give a fuck about any of that. Footing the bill, who pays for it, doesn't matter to them. Psychoanalysts are naturally, systemically blind to economic relations, but fetishizing money in its own way, which is, again, fucking hilarious. This is, if there is a great way that they bring Lacan in, this is the purloined letter. This is the symbolic function of money. And Lacan is like proof of this par excellence in how it's handled or how it's done. But how these things come in and become fetishized is kind of the point. They give the example, the analysis reveals the unconscious conflicts of a woman with her husband, but the husband's paying for the bill. This is not saying, oh, well, then the analyst is corrupt. It's like, no, that's not the point. I mean, maybe a little like, oh, the husband's paying me, or dad's paying me for the kids, so I'll do what the dad wants. Maybe, but that's not their point. They're saying that the conflict that exists between spouses, they don't have a conversation. Does the analyst go, hey, your husband's paying for this. Do you think that there's any conflict or anything that comes from the way that money is handled in your relationship that way? Not a thing. Not a thing they do. It happens. It's extremely rare. It's extremely rare. That primarily, conflicts are seen as these interpersonal, non-larger social setups. So as such, we end up having this weird thing where we can actually see that the payment structure is reproducing the very dependence that is supposedly being treated in that session, right? But they say this isn't the only time we encounter the duality of money. The structure of external financing, and as a mean of internal payment, along with the objective dissimulation that it comprises, essential to the capitalist system. Dissimulation is such a funny word for this. Because again, dissimulation, concealed, but not just deceived. It's not like hiding it. It's not an intentional hiding. It's more, underneath. That's also happening, but it's hidden over, like concealer that you would use to cover something up. But again, it's not deception. It's just concealed. Money, as they've been talking about, is not to be discussed as it's external economic versus internal symbolic. That duality of money within psychoanalysis is kind of front and center. And when you do this, you have this dissimulation, because you have money as the internal symbolic medium, maybe, but also like it just breaks it apart. The money structures this economic dependence that the husband and wife are having as part of their relationship. And it appears as a neutral symbolic exchange. That's the favorite thing of capitalists. They love talking about how money is neutral, like across the board. Across the board. They love that. Oh, look, it's just exchange. I just gave the guy $50. What's the big deal? So what if he was starving? I gave him $50 to punch himself in the nuts 10 times. What's the big deal? It's $50. It's purely neutral. He was wanting that. Neutral symbolic exchange is very centered to capitalism, but within this, we don't even realize that we're talking about money structuring the relationship that's also here. And by disavowing that or barring that possibility, that puts it in a really That puts it in a really weird place. So it puts it in a weird place. But it's interesting to find this concealment, miniaturized, occupying a place of honor in the analyst's office. They're talking about the clock. They've used this before, that the office of a psychoanalyst or therapist or counselor or whoever is structured around capital. And it's you can see the structure as it's sitting there. It's you've got the things that have places of honor. They've talked about it as being the clock, which is center to everything, diplomas, which give authority, the couch or the analyst chair, the door, the whatever it is. Like there's a million ways. The books, all of these things, the concealment of money is done in these objects, miniaturized, occupying places of honor in the analyst's office. The very economic relations producing these symptoms become hidden. Well, we mystify the rest of the system. And we go, oh, look, your problems with your husband are ultimately because you and your father never ultimately got along. And that's, I think, a challenge. Of course, we've got to talk about you and your father. It's not really you and your husband. By the way, the check bounced this month. I'm sure that has no effect on your stress levels at all. I'll see you next week. Like, that's like, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and if you don't pay the that, like, I'm sorry, like, there's no healthcare, like we don't live in a free healthcare kind of, like there's no healthcare, free healthcare. You don't have you're ended basically.
Well, I'm American, so there is no such thing as free healthcare at all. So, as I like to tell people, my wife, after having our son, had to argue with the insurance company to remind them that the pregnancy and birth was covered and that we shouldn't have to pay the $37,000 bill we got. Which, I mean, that probably had no effect on my wife's stress level. Why would Heather be stressed about that at all? It's only $37,000 fucking dollars. They offered us a payment plan. America. So awful. Sorry. The analyst talks about Oedipus, about castration, and the phallus, about the necessity of assuming one's sex, as Freud says, the human sex. For Freud, it's the human sex is understanding your place and how sex operates and your position in it. And again, if you've ever been like, so wait, do women have penis envy, or is it also a phallus? Yeah, welcome to assuming your sex. The human sex, the necessity for woman to renounce her desire for the penis, for the man to renounce his male protest. Accepting sexual difference. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus type shit. If you're too young to remember that, you're very lucky. Weird eras of everything. God, fucking awful times. Men learning to renounce the femininity of their life. Women renouncing fully penis envy and masculinity and accepting their feminine roles. The prescriptions from Freud ultimately ignore what is actually economic dependence or interdependence or complexity. And that's why they get into this last bit. We maintain there is not one woman, more particularly not one child, who can as such assume her or his situation in a capitalist society precisely because the situation has nothing to do with the phallus and castration, but directly concerns an unbearable economic dependence. I think it's a fairly clear paragraph. Psychoanalysis, and not just psychoanalysis, I would say, I'm in America, so I'm going to be very general, but if you're not, your country's not like this, good for you. I'm being very specific to my experience living here. We have to assume everything about our lives, assume our, the sexual position we exist in, the social position we exist in. But it's not about, it's only those things, but it's actually the impossibility of accepting economic dependence under capitalism. Because women and children, especially, when they wrote this, but also I would say today still, they don't have the ability to assume their situation because it always involves material subordination. In France in the 1960s and early 70s where they wrote this, and I would say in America very much, the idea of the career woman or thing was still shit on. It was more rare. They worked shitty jobs. Now we have equality, or whatever we want to call it. But the conversation they're having doesn't just apply only to families. They're saying from the ground up, because you are naturally in a position of absolute economic subordination at a material level, not symbolic sexual difference, you cannot assume your situation up front. The other assumes your situation for it. They get to tell you your situation. You are dependent on that situation. Black kids learn their black kids by learning their black kids. That's how it works. They at some point learn what it means in our society to be that. White kids don't learn what it means to be white kids necessarily early on, because that's not the same thing. But at some point, they learn what it means, though. Be a woman, be homosexual, be trans, be queer, be multiracial, whatever you want to say. Feel free to pick a fucking thing as a thing. But that setup is determined externally, and it's determined by those in power. Who is determined as a citizen? By the government. Who is determined as someone who can work? By the state, by the businesses. Who's determined as someone who has the ability to eat food? System. Who's determined who's blah, 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 blah. How can anyone assume their position? No one does. Actually, no one does, is kind of where we're going to end up. But specifically, their critique of psychoanalysis, and it's one of the reasons that they really push the critique of Freud. Freud is so deeply contingent inside of a period of, hey, men are absolutely in charge and children are at the beck and call, so are women. You could beat the shit out of your wife. It wasn't a problem when Freud was around and in his area. You could have affairs. You could do whatever you want. Marital rape was absolutely allowed. How do you know your sexual position as a woman or a child then, especially a child? How do you possibly know your sexual position, let alone anything else, when you're so absolutely dependent across the board on everything? And the woman and the child who succeed in assuming do so only by detours and determinations completely distinct from being woman and being child. If you've ever wanted to get into Lacan, a really interesting question is when he talks about how there's no such thing as a woman. That's a really fucking deep, dark rabbit hole. Enjoy. This is not a terrible way to talk about it, though. And I think Guattari, who writes about similar things, puts it just so much better and more eloquently. The woman and child who succeed in assuming do so by detours and determinations distinct from being woman and being child. Those who manage to find their spot or figure it out, or whatever it is, that setup, they do so through material struggles and strategies. They get jobs, they get an education, they want to find their position, they assume their position by doing strategies that get them to a position. But this has nothing to do with accepting their sexual identity. It's about economic independence. It's always about that. It's always been about that. This has nothing to do with the phallus, but much to do with desire, with sexuality as desire. The phallus, which is this weird signifier in psychoanalytic thought, desire, which is a real productive force, have to be distinguished. And that's what they're doing here. Sexuality as desire is not about symbolic castration, but it's about productively connecting with social fields. Always. Always. For the phallus has never been either the object nor the cause of desire, but is itself the castrating apparatus, the machine for putting lack into desire, for drying up all the flux, for making all the breaks from the outside and the real into one and the same break with the outside, with the real. The phallus is not what desire wants, but it is instead a machine that creates lack within desire. It dries up, and they use a terrier. It's literally dries up. Is it like they mean to desiccate. They mean to turn into a desert. All of the flux, it stops productive connections, creates a space of neutrality and lack that blocks of it that are there at real social breaks, things that interrupt us socially, things in economic situations that cut or slice or shift how we understand things. All of this gets turned into the single symbolic castration moment. This is the huge critique of Lacan, because the break from the real creates the imaginary and symbolic for Lacan. This is their critique of that. And also Freud, because castration is how you break from these things. But that's the thing for them. The machine that is the phallus, this idea of a universal dick, universal fuck toy dick, is actually producing lack. It doesn't represent a natural lack. It's producing a neutralizing lack. Lack is produced. We went through this in sections 2 and 3. But lack is produced inside of this. And this is a huge shift for them.
Brooks, I do want to come in here a little bit regarding a certain part about Lacan, and then maybe some examples where, you got to reintroduce the phallus. Wait, no, you got to reintroduce the lack in order to establish a certain kind of phallus or an impression of the phallus. But are you saying that it does not necessarily need to induce a lack, or the lack has always been there? It was just shifted? Like, is this what we're understanding at this part?
Say that one more time for me.
Is the lack not typically created, but already there? It was organized in a certain way. That's why there is a universal that comes in from somewhere or everywhere or nowhere.
Generally speaking, when we talk about lack prior to, like, outside of this book and D&G and stuff, Foucault, for example, said that he didn't like Anti-Oedipus because he cannot get around the idea of lack not being missing, that it's produced. He doesn't get around that idea. Lacan and all these other thinkers, Zizek. Here's why. When we say something, when we talk about something, there is a distance between the thing and the word we use. Signification, symbolism, whatever we want to say. That difference, that break, the words we're using necessarily lack the real lived thing. So if I say, I want a beer, the language, the way it's spoken, necessitates a lack in and of itself, which produces desire, because the lack, the missing part. If I say, it's the Chrysippus, I think, was the one who said it, but I'll sort of paraphrase. When I say the word beer, when I say a word passes through my lips. Therefore, when I say beer, beer is passing through my lips. But it's because it's not. The word isn't the thing. And so that break between the two, and there's a lot of ways it's formulated. For Lacan specifically, he's focused on the mirror stage, that there's a moment where a child experiences the fact that they can see themselves in a mirror, but it is not them. And so in that moment for him, they have this, oh shit, they're able to imagine themselves that isn't themselves. But until then, they can't. Until then, everything is, they're directly dealing with the real. They don't have a symbolic order or imaginary register in any capacity. But at that moment, they go, oh, fuck. And they start realizing that's Brooks' weight. And then they realize the word is different. And by the word not being the thing.
So I feel like there's the part where, maybe it has to do with because partially what you described sounds very close to a mirror stage. And
yes,
I just
much.
don't know if it does really necessarily have to do with the phallus that's being talked about here, where for the last sentence of the first paragraph, it says, drying up all the flows, making all the breaks from the outside and from the real into one. And the same break with the outside.
Yes.
With the
so
right?
for Lacan and Freud, especially, but The phallus is like an object par excellence of all of the lack, because we can't have a phallus. No one has a phallus. I have a dick, but I don't have a phallus. A girl has penis envy. She doesn't have a phallus. The phallus is the eternally lacking thing. And as such, in the way that they talk about it, it is the thing missing. And therefore, because it's all of us we all want phallus, but we can't have phallus. Men wish they had a dick, and that was a phallus. Like it's that kind of thing. It's this really weird sort of setup like that. This is the universalization of lack, and that's why they use it in that way, and they're talking about it here.
Yeah. So what I want to go originally, I wanted to ask is like, is it lack precedes or the phallus precedes the other? Because it does matter if you're looking at Lacan and then how, the lack will, the phallus will reintroduce the lack, and then the production will be repeated in the future. But if there is some sort of lack precedes the phallus, then I don't know if it was...
No, the phallic object is created in, like, for Lacan, again, this is, I'm now arguing for things I don't believe in, so it's kind of tough. But I would say that the phallus, as they're talking about it here, is because they're talking about the castrative moment as they're talking about it. The phallus is the object of desire. It's the object of ideology. It's the object for Lacan of so many things, the object that can't be had. And it plays into the object petit a and so many other things. They're saying, just to like maybe more simplify, but the thing they're playing specifically is that psychoanalysis interprets things as sexual conflicts. I can't assume that I'm a man. I don't feel like a man. Or, I have penis envy because I'm a woman, or I have castration anxiety because I'm a child and my dad's going to castrate me. But these things are actually themselves not sexual conflict. They're actually symptoms of economic dependence. The inability to assume one's sex for a man is a man takes care of the family. But if you don't feel like you're taking care of the family, are you a man? Well, is it that you're not a man, and so therefore you're having to deal with, you just need more confidence in being a man, which is what you see Jordan Peterson, a lot of other fuckers go to? Or is it that actually you can't take care of your family and you need to accept like the reality of your situation because you actually have this absolute economic dependence under capitalism? As a woman, penis envy, women, and again, during Freud's time, but still during this, women weren't allowed to work. Not really. They were encouraged to stay home, so they were dependent on men. Do they have penis envy, or do they have income envy? That would be kind of maybe the way they'd put it. And for a child, is it that they're worried dad's going to cut their dick off, or that the dad's going to cut them off financially? Like these are symptoms of unbearable economic dependence under capitalism. Women and children, and I would argue men too, cannot assume their situations, not because they don't have a sexual symbolic position to understand, but because of the real material subordination that exists.
Yeah, so, I do feel like I actually kind of agree with what... So did you say that you do not agree with what you just said, that you were just trying to paraphrase?
No, that last bit I agree very much.
Okay, yeah, because I am in agreement with that. And because
the stuff earlier, here's the challenge for me. I'm often asked about like Lacan. This happened, Code Craxus is in here. So this happened in chat the other day. I'm not like a giant Lacan stan at all. If anyone's been around long enough, they'd know that's not the case. But a lot of the stuff that they're talking about in here necessitates me defending and building and showing here is what they're critiquing. In the same way that if we were to go read Das Kapital, I actually have to talk about business and monopoly and industrialization of the time. I can't relate it to, unique forms of capital that exist now. I have to talk about the thing that they're critiquing. And so as such, it gets a little floaty that I'm like defending Lacan, which I tend not to do, or Freud, which I really don't tend to do. But the pushes here for me is that last bit, because the thing they're pushing is the idea that all of this stuff is being interpreted as sexual conflicts. But the reality is, underneath it, within this global social system that we are in, that is what is actually causing the inability of someone to assume a situation. Because even though they are a woman or I am a man, I can't just be a man because there's no fucking work. Fuck you, Jordan Peterson. What the fuck does it mean for me to take care of my family? And a man's got to do what a man's got to. It's like, fuck, eat shit. But because I internalize what it means to be a man and that I'm failing to be a man, psychoanalysis and therapy assumes it's a sexual conflict.
I know what you're talking about because I went through some bad therapists like this. But what I'm trying to get here right now, because I'm not sure if they're implying that there's an order of a certain mirror stage operation and a machine that put lack into the desire. Because phallic function does exist during the formation of mirror stage, but it seems like they're saying the break of functions works a little bit differently. And they're saying, oh, in this, like, probably after the mirror stage, it's drying up all the flows, making the break from outside and from the real, because after the mirror stage, usually the real is at least somewhat foreclosed, not foreclosed, but somewhat shielded from the usual operation, no matter where you look at it, in the symbolic or in the imaginary. So I do feel like they're kind of implying some sort of critique against the old proposed side from Lacan. That's what I was trying to get at, because if there's a machine...
So on that, I would say, give me 2 seconds. Just don't go anywhere. 1 second. Because when it comes to Lacan and it comes to how they take it on, I can't hear anything, so no one talk. When it comes to that, again, Deleuze, I would not say is the strongest reader of Lacan. Felix Guattari clearly is, but inside of there's one. I'm going to mention a couple of texts just really quick. It's Soft Subversions, which is one of my favorite collections of him. But Capitalist System Structures and Processes is literally his writing, and it's about this specifically. And then secondarily with that, 1 second. Don't talk. No one talk. It'll fuck me up. It's going to be a Beyond the Psychoanalytical Unconscious inside of Chaosophy, which, as you can see, I've read more, but I've read a lot more. But specifically, this is where he starts getting into things. There's a lot. Chaosophy would be, if you're interested in where they go or how they get their stuff from Lacan and how they critique him and build off of it, it's hard for me to say anything but Chaosophy as being the perfect. Like, some of the titles are so fucking good. 3 Billion Perverts on the Stand. I Have Even Met Happy Drag Queens. It's fucking some good fucking shit written here. Guerrilla Psychiatry.
Wait, hold on.
Drug. Just good stuff.
What? Something about drag queens? I'm confused.
I've Even Met Happy Drag Queens, which is, it's meant to be a little bit of a sardonic comment. But it's because for Lacan that you wouldn't.
Okay.
No. Like I said, it's like
that's an interesting. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Desire, on the other hand, has to manage as best it can. In fact, it deserts man's body in order to immigrate to the side of the woman, or more precisely, to the becoming woman's side. What is essential here is not the object in question, but the transformational movement. It's this movement, this passage, that the Mirabelles help us explore. A man who loves his own body, a man who loves a woman's body, or another man's, is himself always characterized by becoming woman. This is, of course, much different than an identification to the woman, even less to the mother, as psychoanalysts would have us believe. Instead, it is a question of a different becoming, a state, in order to become something other than that which the repressive social body has forced us to be. Just as workers, despite the exploitation of their work power, succeed in establishing a certain kind of relationship to the world's reality, Women, despite the sexual exploitation which they undergo, succeed in establishing a true relationship to desire, and they live this relationship primarily on the level of their bodies. And if at the economic level the bourgeois is nothing without the proletariat, men aren't much where bodies are concerned, if they do not achieve such a becoming woman. From whence comes their dependence on the woman's body or the woman image, which haunts their dreams and their own bodies, or which they project onto their homosexual partner's body? From whence comes the counterdependence to which they try to reduce women, or the predatory sexual behaviors which they adopt in regard to them? Economic and sexual exploitation cannot be dissociated. Bureaucracies and the bourgeois maintain their power by basing themselves on sexual segregation, age, class, race, and codification of attitudes and class stratification. Imitation of these same segregations and stratifications by militants, for example, the refusal to look closely at the concrete alienation of women and children, at possessive and dominating attitudes, at respect for the bourgeois separation of private and public, constitutes one of the foundation of the present bureaucratization of the revolutionary workers' movement. Listening for the real desires of the people implies that one is capable of listening to one's own desire and to that of one's most immediate entourage. That doesn't at all mean that we should put class struggles way down on the ladder beneath desire. On the contrary, each juncture between them will bring an unexpected energy to the former. That is the front on which, with much modesty and tenacity, the Mirabelles, a drag dance troupe, work. But they especially don't want us to take them seriously. They are struggling for something more important than what is serious. Their motto is, drag in monetary crisis, drag green bean. What interests them is to help pull homosexuality out of its ghetto, even if it is a militant ghetto. What interests them is that shows like theirs touch not only homosexual circles, but also the mass of people who just don't feel good about themselves. It's one of my favorite. I fucking love Guattari's writing. When he's on fire, he's so fucking good.
I'm just gonna have to say, I disagree with the fact that Lacan will say that there is no happy drag queens. I disagree.
Right.
But,
no. It's
yeah.
You have to, one, presume first they're French, therefore they're being sardonic and a little shitty. But two, also know that they're being French. Like, I don't know how else to put it. Like, it's and even when I'm talking about, because these are a lot of people, like, even just in chat, it's like, hey, that they're opposed to Lacan. Like, they're not. Oppositional means like binary. This is about constructing and utilizing tools. And so they're always shitting on each other. And a lot of the language they use can be shitty, but they do not mean it as like, oh, he's always this. But instead, this is kind of the space he produces, or this is the thing he fucks with. I would highly recommend The Becoming Woman and that, which is in Chaosophy.
I just feel good. Like, with the last part, it says, same break with the outside and the real at the same time, right? But because the drag queens are originally emerged because this category captures unsymbolizable conflict within the large scale. So if it does reintroduce some phallic function without really subjugating in other categories, then that's a different kind of jouissance. Now, happiness and jouissance, big difference. But, I think they're trying to go with some sort of productive critique, but they don't want to go into the specific context too much. But I think
this is a 3-page essay from Guattari in his own collection. So it's not Deleuze. That one is straight Guattari, what I just read.
Interesting. Maybe there's some division between them too.
There is. There is.
Yeah, because I had some really bad.
But to bring it back, because I'm going to try to close out. I've got 3 minutes, and then I actually have to go. Okay. The point of that, the point of kind of that piece, the reason it relates is, again, how the economic and social space rises around things or shows up with sexual difference, with how we find ourselves within, and then how we, again, rebel within that. The way that things are closed off, instead of presuming that there is a truth category that someone must find themselves in, that they are man or woman or child, and that these things themselves are the first relationship they first have to decide, and they have to build themselves and place themselves against one or two and figure out their coordination. That this thing, well, we do close into that. What's actually happening is the child is experiencing the world through parents, but they are effectively dispersed across a non-human social plane and existing within the pressures of capitalism. And the pressures of capitalism that create those interpersonal dependencies, ressentiments, anger, frustrations, whatever it may be that are happening, that they tend to be visited. And everyone here has probably done this. You've snapped at someone, or you've said something shitty to a person when it's literally like the opposite of what you meant, or you're stressed, and so you take it out on someone who you love, who doesn't really have anything to do with it, because you find it like children do this. Everyone's done this at one point or another. These interpersonal things that we then use to cover up those dependencies that the outside world's putting within us, that we use to narrativize and justify. This is what that piece, and I think this paragraph is ultimately driving at, because that ends with the last thing. The machine, the phallus, the eternal lack, the eternal goal that we cannot achieve, however you want to put this, is itself the castrating apparatus. It isn't that we are castrated from the phallus and we were once had it. No, it is the machine that does that. It is the machine that puts lack within desire. It is that which dries up flux. It is that which makes the breaks from the outside and from the real into one and the same break with the outside and with the real. It turns it from outside in to inside out, and we flip it. And when we flip it, we put ourselves there, we forget that everything is still penetrating, but we've created that space. With that, I have to run because I have a work thing, because this does not pay me enough money to do, and I would love it if it did. If you'd like to have that happen, feel free. Super chats are always lovely. Patreon's the best way if you can give a couple bucks. Be nice. But of course, the best thing you can do is join us live at discord.gg/DGQC, and then you can hear LJ yell at me and say things to me endlessly as we keep talking about stuff, and Josh's and everyone else, and you can be one of us, and you can talk to us, and we can figure this out. I'm going to close out YouTube. Do you want to say anything last, LJ?
No, I have something about donation, but feel free to cut up the recording and stuff.
Excellent. I will do so. And YouTube, I will see you soon enough.